Hey mi gente, it's Julian Steve. You already know my name, but if you're new here, hey! Today we're going to be talking about why gatekeeping blackness is important. Exactly, yes. Okay mi gente, okay. We're going to start now. What is blackness? According to Merriam-Webster, blackness is the fact or state of belonging to a population group that has dark pigmentation of the skin. The fact or state of being black. Definition B. The social and cultural identity and experience of black people. I do agree with both definitions. However, I would have preferred if they mentioned Africa, because deep into everything related to blackness, it goes back to Africa because that's our African roots. Where depending what part of the diaspora you're from, and I feel like people try to water down the definition of blackness or black people without including Africa in the equation. Yes, Africa's a continent, but when we think of African, we think of black people because we're black. According to Wikipedia, black supremacy is a racial supremacist belief which maintains that black people are superior to people of other races. A couple of people have been accused of being a black supremacist. One of them happens to be Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey was born on August 17, 1887 in St. Anne's Bay, Jamaica. Garvey was the youngest of 11 children. Jesus Christ. His parents were very busy back then. When he turned 14, he left school to work as a printer. He started to travel to Central America for 3 years. He wrote about the exploitation of black migrants in plantations. After that, he traveled to London to get an education at Birkbeck College. In 1912, Marcus Garvey went back to Jamaica and founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association, UNIA. The objective was to unite the whole African diaspora and encourage black people to go back to Africa. Now, I'm going to read a couple of quotes from Mr. Garvey, and it comes from the Portable Harlem Renaissance Reader, which, by the way, I have the book. I don't have it right here because why? But also, I bought the book for college while I was attending college, and I'm thankful that I'm able to reuse it now that I'm making this type of video. He states, "The masses of Negroes in America, the West Indies, South and Central America are in sympathetic accord with the aspirations of the native Africans. We desire to help them build up Africa as a Negro empire where every black man, whether he was born in Africa or in the Western world, will have the opportunity to develop on his own lines under the protection of the most favorable democratic institutions. It would be useless, as before stated, for bombastic Negroes to leave America and the West Indies to go to Africa, thinking that they will have privileged positions to inflict upon the race that bastard aristocracy, that they have tried to maintain the Western world at the expense of the masses. Africa shall develop an aristocracy of its own, but it shall be based upon service and loyalty to race. Let all Negroes work toward that end. I feel that it is only a question of a few more years before our program will be accepted not only by the few statesmen of America who are now interested in it, but by the strong statesmen of the world as the only solution to the great race problem. There is no other way to avoid the threatening war of the races that is bound to engulf all mankind, which has been parenthesized by the world's greatest thinkers. There is no better method than by apportioning every race to its own habitat. From my understanding of this section of the book and or essay, because I believe it came from one of Garvey's essays, he was speaking as to us, and when I say us, I'm talking about Black people, African people. Yeah, he was speaking to us about building Africa up. He wants Africa to get more resources that we could implement now that we are free people living in the United States. And of course, he wasn't always talking about the United States. He was talking about other parts of like the diaspora. I believe when he made this specific speech, he was speaking to Black Americans. I do believe like his intentions were good at this moment because he wanted to get more people from the diaspora to try to support Africa and support more resources over there instead of living in America, relying in America due to the white supremacy going on in this country at the time and currently, but obviously we're talking about the past, not the present. But anyways, Marcus Garvey wanted more unity within the diaspora and getting more people within the diaspora to go to Africa, live in Africa, put in their resources over there, and stop supporting the United States. That's not bad until you get to the next statement that he said. 59 years ago, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation declaring 4 million Negroes in this country free. Several years prior to that, Queen Victoria of England signed the Emancipation Proclamation that set at liberty hundreds of thousands of West Indian Negro slaves. West Indian Negroes celebrate their emancipation on the first day of August of every year. The American Negroes celebrate their emancipation on the 1st of January of every year. Tonight, we are here to celebrate the emancipation of the slaves in this country. We are the descendants of the men and women who suffered in this country for 250 years under that barbarous, that brutal institution known as slavery. You who have not lost trace of your history will recall the fact that over 300 years ago, you forebears were taken from the great continent of Africa and brought here for the purpose of using them as slaves. Without mercy, without any sympathy, they worked our forebears. They suffered, they bled, they died. But with their sufferings, with their blood, which they shed in their death, they had a hope that one day their prosperity would be free. And we are assembled here tonight as the children of their hope. When it comes to Marcus Garvey's speech on the Emancipation Proclamation of the West Indies and the United States. I guess it was a powerful moment because of the passion that he had at the time and how he was enraged, and he got other black people to be enraged with him. We shouldn't feel the need to feel as if we owned England or the United States for the atrocities they've caused within the diaspora. And while I appreciate that, I do believe that Marcus Garvey did went too far when it comes to like putting black people on a pedestal over other races. I'm not before, because I know this might be controversial. I'm not saying you cannot uplift the race. We are doing it in some shape or form. I'm specifically talking about black people, but it's not only black people who do this, it's every other race, cultures, etc. But since we're talking about blackness, I'm specifically speaking on black people right now until we get further on the video. But anyways, there's nothing bad about praising your race. There's nothing bad about putting black people on a pedestal, as long as it's not in a superficial, in the complex way, like black people are gods. I feel like that's pushing it, in my opinion. What I'm talking about is when people put black people on a pedestal to the point where it's giving that you think we're superior to other races, and that is damaging in a way, because it goes back to like when people try to not only use eugenics against us, but also try to see us as not human. And I feel like when we put these type of superiority type of mumbo jumbo onto us, more people are going to believe that we're superior, that to the point that we do not feel pain, that we could get run all over, or people trying to fetishize us and do other heinous stuff towards black people. In that area, I do believe that Mr. Garvey pushed it too far, and it is giving black supremacy vibes, in my opinion. God never intended that man should enslave his fellow, and the price of such a sin or such a violation of heaven's law must be paid by everyone. As for me, because of the blessed past, because of the history that I know, so long as there is within me the breath of life and the Spirit of God, I shall struggle on and urge others of our race to struggle on to see that justice is done to the black peoples of the world. Yes, we appreciate the sorrows of the past, and we are going to work in the present that the sorrows of our generation shall not be perpetrated in the future. On the contrary, we shall strive that by our neighbors, succeeding generations of our own shall call us blessed, even as we call the generation of the past blessed today. And they indeed were blessed. They were blessed with a patience not yet known to man, a patience that enabled them to endure the tortures of the sufferings of slavery for 250 years. Why? Was it because they loved slavery so? No, it was because they loved this generation more. Isn't it wonderful? Transcendent? What then are you going to do to show your appreciation of this love? What gratitude are you going to manifest in return for what they have done for you? As for me, knowing the sufferings of my forefathers, I shall give back to Africa that liberty that she once enjoyed hundreds of years ago. before her own sons and daughters were taken from her shores and brought in chains to this Western world. In this section, Mr. Garvey talked about how Black people were enslaved and how that made an impact. And he talked about, I guess, like the broader perspective as to why Black people shouldn't feel ashamed about it while also not dwell on the atrocities that happened in the past, but to move forward. And then this was like his way to encourage Black people to go back to Africa. And when I say Black people, I'm specifically at this part of this of what I'm talking about, I'm specifically speaking on Black Americans because he was in the United States when he made the speech. But yeah, he was trying to encourage Black Americans to go back to Africa, and by doing that, he mentioned about the atrocities that Black Americans went through with white people in the United States. And then he talked about encouragement and not dwelling over the past, but to move forward. While I agree, and I believe that wasn't his intention here, I do believe that by leaving the United States just so that way you can escape your issues here, I do not believe it's a bad thing, but I also do not believe it's a good thing, because I do feel like you shouldn't feel like you need to leave your home. And we have to remember, this land is African Americans, Black Americans. They were brought here by force. We gotta call a spade a spade. They were brought here by force. So when Mr. Garvey tries to encourage them, I feel like he could have been, I guess, more supportive, because there were a couple of people that called him out about that and saying that Black Americans should feel the need to fight in this country for their rights and for their equality, because this is where they're from. This is where their roots started all over again, because unfortunately they were strapped away from their roots from Africa. So they had to build a new culture in the United States. So people back then, and mind you, it wasn't only Black Americans. There were a few Caribbean people, and when I say Caribbean, I'm talking about Black Caribbean people who were calling out Mr. Garvey because of him trying to push Black Americans away from the United States and not resolving their issues in the United States. I get it, but can we also resolve the issues here? And what happens if some Black Americans do not want to go to Africa? And then that's what happened further on. Like, if you read more into Mr. Garvey, he ended up losing his following from Black Americans, and he started to hear more from like Black Caribbean people agreeing with his ideas. But then it later backfired like further on in the years, because more Black Americans started to like fall off of him. There was like a agenda to try to push him out of predominantly Black American spaces by the US government, specifically the white US government. And then I believe they even tried to like get Mr. Garvey killed as well. And then they even spread rumors that he passed away like a month before he actually passed away, that's messed up. But yeah, Mr. Garvey was an interesting character. May he rest in peace. So we're going to be talking about biracial people. However, we're going to discuss two biracial men, Michael Porter Jr. and Drake. Michael Porter Jr. is a basketball player, and his birthday is June 29th, 1998. His mother is white and his father is Black. His mother lived in Iowa and hardly seen black people, whereas his father lived in Mississippi and mostly lived around black people. When they visited his grandparents at Mississippi, his parents wouldn't hold each other's hands due to being an interracial couple. While this is unfortunate, I do find it weird that they were raised with opposite races. Obviously, they both different races, but what I mean is that I find it weird that the mother hardly interacted with black people, the father hardly interacted with white people, but ended up here together. That's weird. I hear stories like we somehow connected because we were in a space where it was diverse, at least on the internet and some stories I've heard in real life. But this, I don't know, something is off. I'm not gonna get too deep into it because at the end of the day, they still married. They happened to have 8 kids, 8 biracial kids. So I guess things is working out. So I'm just gonna mind my business when it comes to that. I do want to read 2 articles from Mark J. Spears and then give my opinions after that. In the 2017 article, he states, "Sometimes people relate to you different," Porter Jr. told The Undefeated after practice Wednesday in preparation for the Nike Hoop Summit in Portland, Oregon. "Based on race, they've got a perception of you. People think that light-skinned black males are the pretty boys. I've got to go out here every night and show them that it's not true. We can get after it. Some people, regardless of race, value light-skinned people, let alone light-skinned black or mixed with black people. So yeah, Michael is not far off. However, being labeled a pretty boy is a luxury. Not everybody in your community has that luxury, especially with the hyper masculinity of brown to dark-skinned black men. If you watched my Black Male Femininity Explained video, you already know I went through a lot being deemed as a feminine black man. Without giving too much away, mixed with black boys were one of my harassers. Instead of these boys and men admitting that they were envious of me, they started projecting their insecurities by bullying me and gossiping about me. It took me until recently to realize that. They probably wanted to have some of my traits, but knew they couldn't due to society pressure. Either way, I get where Michael is coming from. However, I do believe he needs to see that he somewhat has a privilege that not too many black men get. Unfortunately, by him looking white, he's deemed more acceptable as a black person.
Did it hurt your game? Like, well, because you don't know talk to no women. Yeah, like you can't learn no game if you ain't never had no issue in that department. But the awkwardness now, it got to be awkward. Like you sitting at home, your parents are teaching you, then you go back into the world.
I still have some little shorties running around my neighborhood that I would go talk to.
So you were still shooting? Yeah. Because we light skinned.
Exactly.
Speaking of that though, you in high school, you talked about being light skinned. You're biracial.
Yeah.
And so is Chan as well.
You mix black and white?
Yeah, my mama white, daddy black.
Yeah. Okay. And you mentioned about, and I don't think people understand colorism as much. Like, we talk a lot about racism
Yeah.
But within our own communities, like people don't really have to voice colorism because it's in our own community. But you mentioned about being light skinned and having to fight the soft label because of that.
Yeah.
You know, how real of a thing was that?
Y'all being jealous of us. They be jealous. You know what I'm saying?
Come here, brother.
Hey, you know you got in trouble.
Slide back.
You know you got your ass in trouble.
What's that?
I'm not trying to devalue his experience and or devalue his blackness, because at the end of the day he is half black. He just doesn't look as black as me or even some of my mixed race friends who happened to be half black and or half white or half something else. He can easily pass as a white man if he wanted to. But of course, once he gets the tans and or certain haircuts, you can kind of see that he is mixed, but he benefits from looking mostly white. He also said this in 2017. I like it. I consider myself black because my dad is black. It's just crazy seeing my mom and dad interact. They are different. The way they talk is different. I kind of get some of them both. My mom doesn't want me to talk a certain way, and then my dad. It's funny. I can relate to both. That's nice. I like a dynamic where the children, specifically biracial children who happen to have a black parent, they try to instill their culture and beliefs to their children, as long as it's not toxic. But same thing going for the white parent or the non-black parent in general. So I like that. However, how you saying you identify as black just because of your dad? I hope everyone catched that. That was weird. I mean, it's not weird, but I feel like this is a norm that people think just because the dad is black, they can identify as black too. That doesn't make sense, because that would mean that if it was the reverse, if it was a black woman who has a biracial kid, the kid would be black because the mother is black but the dad is not. I hope someone can educate me, but that doesn't make sense to me. And then when you think about people that do end up in these interracial relationships, most of them, they wanted their kids to come out mixed. That's why they got in these relationships in the first place. So when I see stuff like this, I'm very confused. In the 2020 article, he states, "Don't let nobody put you in a box, portal the undefeated. People might try to say you too white for your black friends, too black for your white friends. So it can be tough for a light-skinned kid, but you don't ever have to conform to what they want you to be." Absolutely, I agree with Michael. You shouldn't be conformed to what people want you to be. However, you have to also understand when you have a privilege over other groups of people, specifically within one part of your community, you should acknowledge it. You shouldn't pretend that that's not the case. And once again, I'm trying to understand from his experience, but at the same time, I do want to challenge people. That is why I keep bringing up ideas left and right. I know some people might get pissed off, but it is what it is. I do not know what to tell you. Now we're on Drake. Drake is an actor, singer, and rapper. Drake's mostly known for his music career and received scrutiny about it too. We'll get into the scrutiny in a bit. Drake's mother is white and his father is black. Drake has benefited from his mixed race heritage. He sure has, which prompted Kendrick Lamar to release 4 diss tracks against Drake. One of them, which is currently still on the Billboard Hot 100, Not Like Us, became Kendrick's 4th #1 single in the United States.
Because like listening to your music is like you're super successful, you're one of the best to ever do it, yet you still have this chip on your shoulder. I remember listening to Diplomatic Immunity. You know, you have the line where you say you're black excellence, but it was come to you, it's not the same though. Like, why do you think that still, like, I guess, that dark cloud is over you, over your head?
Well, I think I've been in a lot of rooms and in a lot of conversations and just I've felt the other side of judgment and, you know, racial judgment sometimes, like being light-skinned, you know, being Canadian, having people that I look up to and respect tell me that I can't identify with what's going on because, you know, and granted, I'm also not the most outspoken person when it comes to political issues. I prefer to talk about it amongst my people, and if we're gonna do something, I prefer to go and make the change or actually do something and not just like post about it so that people are like, oh wow, this guy's really conscious about what's going on. Like, you know, the work we put in the communities, you know, the way we give back is legit. It's on the ground. Yeah. You know, it's not so you guys can all just like, you know, double tap and say, wow, oh my God, Drake's so.
I want to read a couple of things Chair Adams mentioned in her 2024 article about Drake. She states, similar controversies have followed Drake throughout his career, making Lamar's criticisms the latest in a long history of claims that Drake's industry practices may be exploitative, but for Drake's defenders, the issue isn't a matter of exploiting black cultures and artists, but of race. I'm happy that Claire mentioned this because I believe a couple of people were misinterpreting Kendrick's motives with his diss tracks towards Drake. And while I do believe certain stuff that Adams mentioned were true to like some effect, I do believe people also forget that the bigger picture of Kendrick Lamar's diss tracks were to point out that Drake is upheld in the white supremacist industry, Hollywood, yeah, basically. And because of that, he benefits more in the industry over a black artist, even as big as Kendrick Lamar. Drake is still the bigger artist. Kendrick's motive was more of pointing out the hypocrisy of Drake and the hypocrisy of the industry as a whole. Drake benefits from that because he is a biracial man. And whether you want to admit it or not, because of Drake being biracial, he markets easily with a variety of people. And that's why certain people try to use Drake as the example of what is blackness, and or when they try to culturally appropriate from black culture, which goes back to the proximity thing when it comes to like biracial people with other groups of people. Because even though they half black and half of something else, most people see a relatability when it comes to that. She also states, sometimes some of my blackest friends can be just as cruel by making you feel excluded or making you feel like you can't get in on this, he said in 2019 during an interview with Rap Radar. I associated myself as a black man, he said, lamenting feeling that he is not often celebrated as a black artist for his accomplishments. It's something that I just acknowledge and I keep it moving.
Sometimes I do feel like if, you know, sometimes I don't feel celebrated when I know maybe somebody else would be celebrated for those accomplishments, you know? I don't feel like people say when Drake is the artist of the decade, I don't think anybody says, wow, a black artist is the artist of the decade. I don't think anybody says that, really. I never heard anybody say that in the last few weeks. You know, and I associate I associate myself as a black man. So for me,
how can I say this without being mean? Drake, you're not black. You're mixed. And that's okay. Trust me. I'm somewhat of a fan of yours. I used to be a hardcore Drake fan. Now, no. I rarely hear Drake's music as of now too, but that's another discussion. Growing up, I always knew that Drake was different from me. I always knew that even though we got somewhat of a similarity when it comes to like certain interests and or me liking his music, I always knew Drake wasn't as black as me, if that makes sense. And besides of my experiences with mixed race people, specifically mixed with black boys and men in New York City, I always knew that Drake and I were different. So I do empathize with Drake. I get it that he wants to be included when it comes to making a wave for black people in the industry, in the music industry. And he wants that acknowledgement. But at the end of the day, you're marketable towards numerous people, not just black people. And then you're taking up space for black artists who put in more work than you. You have done a lot of cultural appropriation yourself as a biracial man. So that's why numerous people have issues with you and trying to like give you credit within the culture. And when I say culture, I'm talking about black cultures in general, but especially black American culture, because the main target that Drake has been on top of is black American culture. Some people may say, yeah, but Drake's dad is a black American. Yeah, but Drake was born and raised in Canada by a white Jewish mother, and he hardly grew up with his black family. I guess that's why people have issues with Drake now, and even back then as well. Drake, you're a biracial man, a mixed with black man. We appreciate you as an artist. You do not need to take more black spaces by having such a strong title like that, especially if some people complain about your music not having enough substance and originality. But another discussion for another day. And I'm trying not to go hard. Trust me, I like some of Drake's music, if not most of his music, but I'm not delusional. No. I want to read a couple of things from Adam B. Coleman's article. Keep in mind the article came out on March 11th, 2024. He states, as a child, I never felt like I was enough. I wasn't enough to keep my father involved in my life. I wasn't confident enough in myself, and I wasn't black enough for anyone's standards. First off, sorry for your experience, Adam. As a black man raised by a single mother, I understand you. Trust me, I do. He also states, if I dated a white girl, then it was allegedly because I hated all black women, but the truth was that black girls didn't like me at the time. I wasn't black enough for them. My community's objective was to shame me into compliance, become what they wanted, and ultimately relinquish my power of individuality for superficial group acceptance. They felt the need to gatekeep my interests, mannerisms, and romantic partners, or else I'd be excommunicated from my people indefinitely. First off, why do some black men or mixed with black men who were rejected by black girls during their time while adolescents think that it's okay to always make these cop-out these cop-outs as to why they weren't attracted to black girls at the time. I do not get it. And I'm saying this as a socially awkward black man. I get it. But I never tear down any black girls, no black women, or mixed with black women, mixed with black girls. I never try to put the blame on them because honestly, if we're gonna be real, I did not put efforts. I hardly put in efforts when it comes to talking to girls while I was younger. I made the girls try to like interact with me, and even then it failed because a lot of girls in general, regardless of race, they tend to pick on boys that they do have a crush on. I'm not saying it's okay, but from my experience, that happened to me a couple of times. And it was more, I mean, with black girls, I feel like it wasn't all the time. It was mostly, but this is the thing that's gonna get messed up here now. Most of the time when I got bullied, it was from of course, like, I'm talking about girls right now. When it came to girls, it was mostly non-black Latinas. But here's the thing. These Latinas did not like me like the way it was with black girls. The way they bullied me, it was more of them being racist. And they made it clear that they didn't like black people too, just so you know. That's why when I see a couple of them dating black men or mixed with black men, I be like, I mean, mixed with black men kind of makes sense because it's like they closest to whiteness or non-blackness. But when it comes to black men, I be like, Then he talked about how people didn't like the way he acted, which I talked about in the femininity video. I understand that because I went through that too, and people talking about the way I talk and all that other stupidities. If we're gonna be honest, it goes back to stupidities. They weren't valid criticisms at the time, and I believe that what I went through wasn't fair. So I understand where Adam is coming from. But I feel like we as a community, we more harsher on ourselves, on our community in comparison to other races and or other communities, because I'm just noticing there's like a pattern, because I see this shit in real life too. We put the blame on people in our communities more just because of our proximity in our communities versus outside of our communities, which I do find hypocritical, but then at the same time, what you closer to is what you're going to talk about more. But then at the same time, Adam grew up in a predominantly white area at the beginning. He was teased by white people. He started to move into more predominantly black cities. Then when he moves into these cities, he's talking crap about the black people that didn't accept him for the way he is. Like, I'm trying to be nuanced. It's just so hard with some of you people. It's really some of you black people. Oh my God, yo. One more, I promise. The people who gatekeep how I express myself politically based on racial expectations are no different than those grade school children who demanded conformity. Both are uncomfortable when you choose yourself over the group. Years of questioning who I am have led me to a conclusion. I love myself enough not to let strangers define me, and no amount of shaming will make me conform. I am a black sheep, and I am enough. They can call me a coon, white wannabe, or an Uncle Tom, but none of these insults can inflict any pain upon me. Why? Because I know who I am. I love who I am, and nothing can shake this. I'm no longer the child who was insecure about my existence and waiting for people to confirm if I'm acceptable because I accepted myself years ago.
Who is Adam Coleman? I'm the author of a book called Black Victim to Black Victor. I'm a writer for the New York Post and a columnist for Human Events. I've had the privilege of being featured on television networks like Fox News, Talk TV in the UK, Sky Australia, and a myriad of other programs. However, my background isn't in writing or even in commentary, but I have an IT background. Before I dove into this field, I was a IT manager for a small business, but I saw what was happening in my country during 2020. I saw the riots, I saw the reaction to George Floyd. I saw how COVID was taking away our civil liberties. I saw everybody in fear, and I heard narratives from both political sides, but I didn't hear my voice. And so I decided to speak up. I started to write, and I started to use my voice to give another perspective, to make people think.
Before anyone judges, I did a bit of more research on Adam. Adam is an independent. However, he has confirmed that he has voted Republican recently, I think 2022. But usually he votes independently. Now, yes, I can feel some dog whistles with his response. And I get it, that's his experience. I get that's how he feels. And he doesn't want to feel pressure to conforming to societal norms. However, being a black sheep is not always the flex you all think it is. It's not. Yeah, sure, we all can be original, sure, awesome, but you cannot always go against your community. That's why I have an issue with that. I forgot to mention this. He is married to a black woman right now, so congrats. You can still be married to someone of your same race and still have dog whistle ideas and or bigoted ideas, period. So that's why I've mentioned about his wife, not trying to say like, oh wow, he married a white woman, you know, some shit like that. No, it's because to point out the fact that he's married to a black woman and he still have very conservative views. And of course, this is not surprising. Black people tend to be conservative and progressive at the same time, or very conservative, but not conservative to the point that they're going to vote for Donald Trump or vote for the Republican Party. I appreciate Adam for sharing his story and making us see a glimpse of his experience. And I hope he improves on his views and tries to connect with more black people, not just people who are yes men and want to kiss his ass. Why is gatekeeping blackness important? For starters, people purposely identify as black due to a come up and or due to like proximity of blackness. A few people come to mind: Anthony Ramos, J.I. the Prince of New York, and Mike Towers. Not doing enough to address their privilege in predominantly black music genres. Both Justins, Elvis Presley, Bad Bunny, J Balvin, Bruno Mars, and Post Malone come to mind. Biracial people, aka mixed with black people who claim black when it's convenient, not going to give examples. Black people who are in the sunken place, not going to give examples as well. I mean, I do have a series on my channel where I talk about anti-blackness when it comes to black public figures. And as a matter of fact, I made a playlist for it. So go check it out. Thank you so much if you made it this far in this video. I appreciate you. Be sure to like this video, comment, share, and subscribe. I would appreciate it. Tell me, what do you think about gatekeeping blackness? Do you think it's fair? Do you think it's not fair? Do you think you're in the middle? Let me know in the comments. As long as it's not something that does not make sense, I'm going to either ignore you, block you, or both. Choose wisely. Tell me, what do you think about Marcus Garvey, Michael Porter Jr., Drake, Adam, anything I've mentioned in between? Okay, mi gente. Okay, mi gente. Okay. Peace, mi gente.